Today we're going to analyze a terrifying case that will leave you shocked, so watch this video until the end. On May 8, 2013, a pivotal moment unfolded when the St. Paul Police Department received a call from a concerned citizen who reported a possible sighting in the Mississippi River. Responding swiftly, authorities conducted a recovery operation with meticulous care and professionalism. The individual was transported to the appropriate facility for further examination. Forensic experts relied on available records, including dental comparisons, to confirm the person's identity. The findings were conclusive. It was Kira Steger. For her family, who had clung to hope during weeks filled with uncertainty, the confirmation was devastating. Due to the extensive time spent searching, medical examiners were unable to establish a definitive cause of death. Dear viewers, we have the best crime stories on our channel. To make sure you don't miss them, be sure to subscribe and please like the video. This documentary delves into the true story of Kira Steger, born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois, a peaceful suburb just outside Chicago. She was welcomed into the world by her loving parents, Marcy and Jay Steger, who often described their daughter as vibrant, compassionate, and full of life. From a young age, Kira's natural charisma and profound empathy made her beloved among family, friends, and peers alike. Her kindness, determination, and optimistic spirit shaped her into a woman who stood out wherever she went. Those who knew her frequently remarked on her rare ability to make others feel seen and valued, often recognizing potential in people that even they hadn't noticed themselves. Eventually, Kira moved to Minnesota, where she found work at the Mall of America, one of the largest and most iconic shopping centers in the United States. There, she worked diligently in 2 different retail stores, earning the respect and trust of her colleagues. For Kira, her workplace was more than just a job. It was a community where she built genuine friendships and a second family. Her co-workers were far from mere acquaintances. They were central figures in her daily life. Together, they celebrated successes and supported one another through challenges, fostering an environment in which Kira thrived both professionally and personally. Known for her insightful understanding of people's personalities, Kira often encouraged those around her to pursue their dreams and believe in themselves. She had many plans for the future, visions filled with love, achievement, and personal fulfillment. With her compassionate heart and steady ambition, it seemed nothing could stand in her way. On Thursday, February 21, 2013, Kira was scheduled to work a shift at one of her stores. According to colleagues, she was cheerful and upbeat that day. She spoke about plans for a pleasant evening with her husband after work. A simple dinner followed by some time to relax, typical for a couple sharing a routine life. At the time, Kira was married to Jeffrey Trevino. The couple had met roughly 3 years earlier, and their relationship had blossomed into marriage. Friends and acquaintances saw them as a harmonious pair, with no visible signs of discord. Like any couple, they had occasional disagreements, but nothing that suggested serious issues. Their challenges, if any, were private. Even close friends and family were unaware of any significant conflicts. On the surface, they appeared to be just another couple navigating life's usual ups and downs. However, just 2 days later, things took a troubling turn. On Saturday, February 23rd, concern mounted when Kira failed to show up for work. Her absence was not only unusual but deeply worrying. Known for her punctuality, professionalism, and strong sense of responsibility, Kira would never miss a shift without notice. Colleagues immediately sensed something was wrong. Attempts to reach Kira by phone went unanswered, escalating the concern. They then contacted her husband, Jeffrey, hoping he could shed light on her whereabouts. Jeffrey responded that Kira had left their home Friday morning and hadn't returned since. He explained this wasn't entirely out of character. Kira sometimes spent nights away, visiting friends or family without prior notice. Although he acknowledged this pattern, he initially showed no cause for immediate alarm. Jeffrey also mentioned the recent heavy snowfall, suggesting that car trouble or a dead phone battery might explain the lack of communication. Despite his initial calm, he filed a missing persons report later that same day and informed Kira's family. The news shocked the Steger family deeply. Kira was close to her relatives and maintained frequent contact. The thought of her disappearing without explanation was unsettling, triggering immediate worry and emotional distress. Friends, family, and law enforcement quickly mobilized. Law enforcement launched a prompt investigation, as standard in missing person cases. Detectives first interviewed close family and those last in contact with Kira. They visited the Trevino home to speak with Jeffrey, gathering preliminary information. During questioning, Jeffrey recounted spending Thursday evening together, a pleasant night filled with dinner, conversation, and even bowling. Afterwards, they returned home where Kira planned to watch a movie before bed. Jeffrey said she left the house around 8:30 a.m. Friday, mentioning an important work event. According to him, she seemed calm and focused, exhibiting no concerning behavior. He reiterated that brief absences were not unusual, and, while the couple had experienced some minor issues recently, nothing serious had appeared. Their disagreements were routine, typical for any married pair. Detectives probed whether Kira might have stayed elsewhere or been involved with someone else. Jeffrey firmly denied any such possibilities, explaining he had asked Kira before, and she assured him there was no one else. He expressed trust and deep love for her. Meanwhile, investigators circulated Kira's information among local officers and agencies. Flyers with her photo and details were distributed, and law enforcement scoured local traffic and surveillance footage. Officers visited the Mall of America to verify Jeffrey's timeline and interview anyone who might have seen Kira on the day she vanished. The Mall of America, located in Bloomington, Minnesota, covers millions of square feet and hosts hundreds of stores, restaurants, and entertainment venues. Given its size and daily traffic, security is stringent, with an extensive surveillance camera network covering nearly every corner. Investigators reviewed footage from February 21st, the last confirmed day Kira was seen. Cameras showed her leaving work as scheduled, exhibiting no unusual or hurried behavior. Shortly after, Jeffrey appeared on camera. The footage captured the couple meeting, spending time together casually, showing no signs of distress or conflict. They walked calmly through the mall, then left together in their vehicle. The video confirmed Jeffrey's account. Everything appeared normal. Yet, in missing person cases, a lack of suspicious activity does not bring comfort. As days passed without news, the family's anxiety intensified. The pain of uncertainty and helplessness created a tormenting atmosphere. Each day without answers deepened their fear and sorrow. Eventually, driven by concern and determination, Kira's family traveled to Bloomington to join the search. Coordinating with authorities, they also launched a grassroots effort to raise awareness. Dozens of missing person flyers featuring Kira's photo and details were printed and posted on lampposts, storefronts, and community boards. Family members handed out flyers to pedestrians, hoping someone might come forward with even the smallest lead. Meanwhile, investigators continued thorough interviews, speaking with neighbors near the Trevino home. One officer noticed a motorized security camera on a neighboring property that could rotate and cover wide angles. Authorities sought permission to access the footage, hoping to uncover any unusual activity or late-night movement near the home. At the same time, they obtained Kira's mobile phone records. These digital records opened a new chapter in the investigation. Examining her call logs and messages, investigators discovered Kira had an emotionally significant relationship outside her marriage. The man was Ryan Wendt, a manager at the same retail chain where Kira worked. Their relationship was far from casual. Their communication was frequent, personal, and spanned a considerable time. This revelation added complexity and introduced a fresh lead for investigators. At the time of Kira's disappearance, Ryan was reportedly on a road trip toward Colorado. Authorities viewed his travel in light of the relationship and timing, considering it crucial to investigate further. It remained unclear whether his trip related to Kira's disappearance or was coincidental. Efforts were made to reach him, and he was eventually contacted while passing through South Dakota. Ryan agreed to meet law enforcement in Colorado and answered questions. He confirmed their last communication was via text during his trip, shortly before Kira was last seen. Their final messages took place while she dined with her husband, indicating she maintained contact with Ryan in her last known hours. Investigators examined Ryan's phone data, including GPS and credit card transactions, verifying his location. His account was corroborated. He was indeed far from Minnesota on the evening of February 21st. There was no evidence placing him near Kira's location, and his phone's activity showed a consistent travel path out of state. As a result, authorities officially cleared Ryan Wendt of any involvement. He was no longer considered a suspect or person of interest. Still, one key detail lingered. The text conversation between Kira and Ryan had continued well into the night. Records showed that they exchanged messages up until approximately 11:44 p.m. on February 21st. After that, Kira's phone went silent. There were no further outgoing messages, calls, or app activity. It was as if the device had simply gone offline, or been turned off entirely. As that timeline was being examined, a separate team of investigators turned their attention back to the neighbor's surveillance footage. The rotating camera offered sweeping coverage of the residential street where Kira and Jeffrey lived. However, there was one notable limitation. The camera's motorized rotation occurred at fairly rapid intervals. While this allowed it to scan a wide area quickly, it also meant that any suspicious or fleeting event could be missed in an instant. Investigators had to be extremely patient and meticulous, pausing and reviewing the footage frame by frame in hopes of catching anything significant. Even a glimpse, a shadow, a car, a figure, could provide a crucial piece of evidence. But with the camera rotating every few seconds, observation required a trained eye and great care to ensure nothing went overlooked. During one brief sweep, the lens managed to catch a partial view of the house for just a few seconds before continuing its programmed rotation to the right, leaving investigators with very limited visual data. While this footage was valuable, its quick pans and low resolution made it difficult to extract detailed information. Yet even with such constraints, detectives continued combing through the video frame by frame, hoping to uncover moments that might provide clarity. Jeffrey Trevino had shared with investigators his recollection of the night in question. According to his version of events, after he and Kira spent the evening enjoying a meal and a few games of bowling at the mall, they returned home. Once there, he said, they watched a movie together, before eventually going to bed. This description painted a peaceful and uneventful evening between husband and wife. However, investigators remained cautious. They knew that memories could be selective, or in some cases, deliberately altered. As they reviewed the neighbor's footage, a detail caught their attention. Around 2 a.m., the camera recorded what appeared to be Kira's white Chevrolet reversing into the Trevino driveway. The exact sequence of what happened next was difficult to interpret. Due to the low video quality and the constant movement of the camera, there was little clarity. Nevertheless, within a short time, the vehicle was seen leaving the property once again. Investigators needed to know more. When asked about this nocturnal drive, Jeffrey explained that Kira had reminded him to refuel her car so it would be ready for her morning commute. He said that's why he took the car out in the middle of the night. Surprisingly, this part of his account proved to be accurate. Surveillance video from a local gas station confirmed that Jeffrey was indeed present there around 3:30 a.m. This discovery validated part of his story, but it also raised new questions. Most notably, why, after finishing up at the gas station, did Jeffrey not return directly home? Investigators traced his movements and found that instead of driving straight back to his residence, Jeffrey took a route that led him toward the highway. That unexpected detour sparked suspicion. The footage from the neighbor's camera did not capture him returning home, though this could have been due to the camera's rotation schedule. Because the camera only faced the house periodically, it was entirely plausible that he came back during a moment when it was pointed elsewhere. Still, the question of where he went, and why, remained unanswered. Further review of the surveillance footage yielded another notable moment. At precisely 9:21 a.m., on the morning following the couple's evening out, Kira's Chevrolet was seen leaving the driveway once more. Unfortunately, the angle of the camera did not provide a clear view of who was behind the wheel. With no clear visual on the driver, investigators were left in the dark about who had taken the car or what their destination might have been. Later that same day, on Saturday, February 23rd, Kira's employer reported her absence, prompting Jeffrey to file an official missing persons report. It wasn't until Monday, February 25th, however, that a new and significant development came to light. Bloomington police received a phone call from security personnel at the Mall of America. The call concerned a vehicle that had been parked in one of the mall's expansive, multi-level parking structures for several days without being moved. The guards had grown suspicious of the unmoved vehicle and contacted a towing company to have it removed. As per standard procedure, the tow truck driver conducted a brief external inspection of the vehicle before preparing it for transport. It was during this check that the driver noticed something unusual. There were unclear, smudged markings on the trunk lid that seemed out of place. Following his instincts, he chose to report the vehicle to authorities before towing it. Responding officers soon confirmed that the car was registered to Kira Steger. The discovery of Kira's vehicle deepened the gravity of the situation. Investigators conducted a careful examination of the car's interior and surrounding area. Inside the vehicle, they found Kira's handbag. Among its contents were printed documents, divorce forms, apparently downloaded from an online source. This unexpected detail revealed a potential change in Kira's personal circumstances, suggesting that there may have been unresolved tension in her marriage that had not been fully disclosed to friends or family. Even more troubling was the discovery made just behind the vehicle. Lying partially concealed in the slush and ice was a dark, rolled-up trunk mat. When investigators turned it over, they found discoloration that warranted further analysis. The mat was sent for testing, and when the DNA results came back, they confirmed that the genetic material belonged to Kira. This was a somber and heartbreaking development. While her physical whereabouts remained unknown, the implication of what had happened was becoming clearer. For Kira's family and friends, this moment marked a painful turning point. Up until then, there had still been a sliver of hope that Kira might return safely. That hope, though faint, was precious. The discovery of her vehicle, and the presence of biological evidence within it, extinguished that last glimmer. A wave of grief washed over those who knew and loved her, now burdened not only with loss, but also with a host of unanswered questions. What had happened to her? Who had last seen her? And who could have harbored such animosity? From a law enforcement perspective, the case took on a new urgency. The top priority was now identifying the individual who had left the car at the mall. If they could determine who had been behind the wheel when the car left the Trevino residence at 9:21 a.m., they might get closer to unraveling the truth. Surveillance footage from the parking facility was reviewed. While the specific garage where the vehicle was discovered did not have coverage inside, there was a security camera trained on the road leading into the lot. That camera provided a useful lead. It recorded the white Chevrolet arriving at the lot shortly after 9:40 a.m. A few minutes later, a person appeared in the frame. The individual was dressed in a hoodie, their face obscured by the hood. Given the cold February weather, the outfit didn't raise immediate red flags, but the timing of their appearance, just after the car arrived, prompted scrutiny. The person was seen walking calmly away from the lot, crossing a street nearby, and approaching a line of taxi cabs stationed along the curb. After a brief conversation with one of the drivers, the individual got into a cab and was driven away. Investigators saw an opportunity to trace the person's movements further. If they could determine which taxi company operated the cab, they might be able to identify the driver, confirm where the passenger had been dropped off, and, potentially, learn the identity of the person who had last been with Kira's vehicle. By cross-referencing the time and location of the pickup with transportation records, police were able to identify the taxi company that operated cabs in that zone. Using the timestamp from the footage that captured a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt speaking briefly with a taxi driver outside the shopping center, investigators were able to move swiftly. Identifying the vehicle involved in that encounter wasn't difficult. Each of the cabs operating in the area was part of a regulated fleet equipped with modern tracking technology, including GPS systems that recorded every stop, route, and trip duration. Police traced the specific cab based on time and location. The GPS data showed that the individual in the hooded sweatshirt was dropped off just a short walking distance, approximately 1 block, from the home shared by Kira and Jeffrey Trevino. The ride had been paid for in cash, which is less traceable than a card payment, but the digital trail left behind by the cab's tracking system more than compensated for the lack of financial data. This passenger's behavior seemed deliberate, and investigators were beginning to build a detailed timeline of the movements in the hours after Kira's vehicle had been left at the parking structure. As the cab exited the neighborhood, its image was captured by the same neighbor's rotating surveillance camera that had earlier provided glimpses of the Trevino home. Just 2 minutes after the cab disappeared from view, the camera caught another figure entering the frame, a hooded man walking alone down the street. The grainy footage made it difficult to make out his facial features, but one detail stood out clearly: a white, stylized logo displayed prominently on the front of the sweatshirt. Investigators watched as the man continued walking and ultimately entered the Trevino residence. Given the timeline of Kira's disappearance and the proximity of the person's drop-off point to the home, detectives began to develop a strong theory that the man in the footage was none other than Jeffrey Trevino himself. With enough preliminary evidence to justify it, investigators obtained a search warrant for the house. When law enforcement officers entered the property, the initial impression was that of a typical, well-kept suburban home. Nothing unusual or disorderly on the surface. But seasoned investigators knew that appearances could be misleading. What stood out to them were subtle yet significant signs that the house had recently been cleaned, especially in the couple's shared bedroom. Furniture appeared slightly rearranged, and certain areas smelled faintly of industrial cleaning agents. The forensic team began their examination, bringing in specialized equipment and chemicals to assist in identifying trace evidence invisible to the naked eye. When they applied luminol to the bedroom floor, the results were stark. The chemical reacted strongly, causing areas of the carpet to emit a bright blue glow, evidence that the DNA had been recently cleaned or scrubbed. Samples were collected and sent to a lab for DNA testing. The results confirmed the presence of Kira Steger's DNA throughout the premises, leaving investigators with no doubt that everything happened inside the house. This finding dramatically altered the direction of the case. Kira was no longer considered simply a missing person. Law enforcement now had enough evidence. As the investigation deepened, detectives turned their attention to Jeffrey's vehicle. Although a visual inspection of the car did not immediately reveal signs of a struggle or visible evidence, a more detailed search turned up an item of interest: a receipt tucked inside the car. It had been issued by a local gas station roughly 1 hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned at the shopping center parking lot. The timestamp on the receipt was critical. It placed Jeffrey in motion during a key window of time. Detectives visited the gas station listed on the receipt and requested surveillance footage from that morning. The video confirmed what the receipt suggested. Jeffrey Trevino was recorded at the station filling his tank. Afterward, he walked into the store and used an ATM to withdraw cash. The camera captured a clear shot of his face and, more importantly, showed him wearing a jacket that bore a distinctive chest logo, an insignia matching the one seen on the hoodie worn by the figure caught on surveillance near the shopping center. This connection between time, place, clothing, and behavior strengthened the investigative case. Law enforcement now had surveillance footage, physical evidence, and a timeline that placed Jeffrey in key locations before and after Kira's car was discovered. With these elements in place, police moved forward and officially placed 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino under arrest. He was transported to the station for formal questioning and designated the prime suspect in the case. Upon arrival, Jeffrey chose to exercise his legal rights. He contacted his attorney almost immediately, and under legal counsel, declined to answer investigators' questions. While his silence was legally protected, it did little to dispel the weight of the evidence accumulating against him. Even so, for investigators, one critical piece remained missing: the location of Kira's. Until her were found, there was still an element of doubt that could be used in a legal defense. In the weeks that followed, law enforcement, community volunteers, and members of Kira's family conducted ongoing searches across multiple areas in and around St. Paul. They combed through parks, trails, wooded areas, and lake shores. In late March, roughly a month after Kira was last seen, a group of volunteers made a discovery near Keller Lake, located just a few miles from the Trevino residence. Resting near the roadside was a weathered bag that looked out of place. Inside, investigators found a pillow and a shirt. These items were carefully collected and sent for testing. Laboratory analysis revealed that Kira's DNA was present on the materials, confirming that the items had belonged to her or had been in contact with her. This discovery increased the urgency of the search in the area surrounding the lake. At the time, however, heavy ice still covered much of Keller Lake, which complicated dive efforts. Law enforcement brought in search and rescue divers trained in cold water recovery. Despite their efforts, the underwater search yielded no results. On land, search dogs were deployed in the surrounding forest and shoreline. But again, no further evidence was located. It wasn't until May 8, 2013, 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, that a major breakthrough occurred. The St. Paul Police Department received a call from a concerned citizen. The caller reported seeing what looked like a person floating in the Mississippi River. Responding officers arrived quickly and confirmed that the report was valid. The recovery operation was handled with care, and the evidence were transported for examination. Forensic teams worked with dental records to make a formal identification. The results left no uncertainty. It was Kira Steger. Her family, who had clung to hope even through the most difficult days, were now confronted with the heartbreaking confirmation. Because of the long searches, medical examiners were unable to determine a definitive cause of death. This lack of a conclusive forensic explanation added complexity to the legal process. But the cumulative body of evidence, circumstantial, digital, and forensic, was compelling. Based on the physical timeline established through cell phone records, GPS data, video surveillance, and the forensic discovery of Kira's personal belongings, detectives began formulating a detailed theory. They speculated that the events likely took a drastic turn shortly after Kira and Jeffrey returned home out on February 21st. Afterward, evidence suggested that Jeffrey took a series of calculated steps in an effort to conceal what had happened. According to police, he used Kira's vehicle to transport her personal belongings and possibly other items away from their home. That same night, records confirmed that Jeffrey visited a gas station around 3:30 a.m., where he not only fueled the car, but also withdrew cash from an ATM, an action that would later prove significant. Investigators believed that the cash was withdrawn in preparation for a taxi ride the following morning. This foresight indicated an attempt to cover his tracks by avoiding digital payments that could later be traced. The following morning, the timeline continued to build. At 9:21 a.m., Kira's Chevrolet was seen leaving the driveway of the Trevino home. Surveillance footage later captured it entering the parking structure near the Mall of America, where it was left abandoned. Once home, it appeared that Jeffrey spent the remainder of the day attempting to clean and sanitize areas of the house. Investigators believed this was an effort to create the illusion that nothing unusual had happened, and that Kira had simply left for work as usual that morning. The implication was clear. Jeffrey had hoped to construct a narrative in which Kira left on her own, never to return, with her vehicle left behind at her place of employment to support the story. But the thorough work of law enforcement and the many surveillance cameras in place ultimately unraveled that version of events. By the time the case went to trial in the fall of 2013, the prosecution had built a compelling case grounded in surveillance data, digital forensics, DNA evidence, and behavioral patterns. In October 2013, after careful deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Jeffrey Trevino, then 39 years old, was found guilty. However, the jury accepted the defense's argument that his actions were not premeditated in nature. Judge Leonardo Castro announced the formal sentence. Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison. Under Minnesota law, Trevino would be eligible for supervised release after serving a portion of his sentence. Based on current calculations, his earliest possible parole eligibility date would be sometime in the year 2031.